woke up Christmas morning, barely slept a wink all night. Anxious to run downstairs, I can't wait to see the sight. There's bound to be great gifts for me, all tucked under the tree. Santa Claus has come to town, he always visits me. I stepped right in my tracks when I discovered it was true. There's nothing under my tree, I just don't know what to do. I ran and grabbed the phone, a huge mistake must have occurred. I quickly dialed the North Pole, what they said had me disturbed. It seems that his mistaken fact was not an oversight. Christmas Eve has come and gone far off into the night. I stopped right in my tracks when I discovered it was true. There's nothing under my tree, I just don't know what to do. Santa Claus skip my house, guess I misbehaved a bit too much this year. Santa Claus skip my house, guess I misbehaved a bit too much this year. Santa Claus skip my house, guess I misbehaved a bit too much this year. Santa Claus skip my house, guess I misbehaved a bit too much this year.
Hi, good
Hey, hey,
evening, Niddy.
hey. Good evening, Tux.
That sounded great to you?
Oh, yeah, that was fun.
Have you checked out the feed on Twitter?
Right. Yes, it looks good.
It does look good. I
It
have
looks
not looked at
it looks
Twitter.
good
I
in
made
my
sure.
Twitterverse.
Yeah. All right. Good deal. I've
Yeah.
got. I don't have anything queued up, ready to go, but just wanted to see how things were going. We were just testing out a couple of things.
Yeah. hmm
We were discussing about the difference between the Satan and Lucifer phenomenon right before we came on.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then we thought we'd play with something a little bit. And that's how we got here. Things seem to be working.
Streaming softwares are like a ball of yarn, and we're just little cats, and we've got our ball, and we just wanna bat around our balls. But no, this is working great. I'm digging it. Speaking of
Well,
cats,
good deal.
mine decided to leave the vicinity for the stream. So what do you do? But Tux, so I think this week, I was telling you that I wanted to do more of the reading of First Clement and trying to bring. So there's a group of guys, like the Atheists of Milwaukee, I think, and they do these in-depth studies of texts and things like that. And their streams are valuable pieces of content where they're really hashing through like the scholarship and Greek and apocryphal texts and New Testament commentaries and things like that. But the one problem I think with some of it is that that's like a high barrier of entry, right? To be entertained and challenged by that content. I think like I don't think like Kenny or like we pick on Kenny all the time, but like a P Town or like a Jamie is gonna go over to that channel and be like, okay, I wanna hear, how they interpret these texts and evaluate this from like a lived experience as a Christian, right? It's like you get what I'm saying though, like that like dry evaluation approach is like asking me or you, hey, do you want to go data model molecular development this weekend? We'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. And that's maybe where like I want to try and offer something different for reading these texts, right? Like, let's just hear it from like an ex-Christian perspective, trying to figure out what early Christians believed. And I'm willing to be wrong. Like it, if someone has done uh, more extensive research into what the Greek was saying, what church fathers said about church fathers said about church fathers, to give them all, spiritual interpretive reach around, then we can talk about that. But I think uh, doing a conversational type reading of these texts could be something unique for this space. I don't know. What do you think?
So, yeah, I like the idea. If it's the group that you're talking about, I'm familiar with two groups from Milwaukee. One is the Milwaukee Mythicists, and the other's
Milwaukee
Milwaukee
atheists.
something.
Yeah,
Milwaukee Atheists.
yeah,
The
yeah.
Milwaukee Atheists, they really do some in-depth Gnosticism and some great. They really do a thorough job, almost as if they're professors.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
certainly don't have the experience that like a James Tabor and you know any kind of any kind of historian to the degree that James Tabor is.
Hmm.
But they definitely have the scholarly angle pretty much studied as if they had taken all the curriculums from Bart Ehrman and the like. I wonder what Dr. Josh's opinion of Milwaukee atheists is, actually.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty interesting thing to hear about. or Neil's, take, right, of Gnostic informant, right?
Yeah.
Because they're him and GE are just getting into it this week.
So I have a video that I've queued up
Ooh, cool.
that I think you and I should watch together and do a critique on and get your idea. I like this guy. He's a former atheist who almost makes his video contents he almost makes his video contents in a way that caters to trying to tell atheists that Christianity is solid on solid foundation.
Okay.
However, I push back. I push back pretty pretty hard.
Well, that's a great comment
So
from Yahoo on my channel. Sometimes I'd almost rather hear scriptures from the atheists. They usually take the text more seriously. Well, yeah, it's
yeah,
because, when um, we're trying to assess, the spiritual condition or the believed spiritual condition of first century Christians, we want to get a sense of, what did these people really believe and how did they live that out? What if this was the kind of thing that was normal for them? Um, and how does that correlate to what Christians think now or why have Christians maybe departed from that kind of tradition or idea? Yeah, I think that's a more serious and honest way to look at something like that, so that um, it's not like, oh, well, this early Christian, they were mistaken, but we know now, right? The Holy Spirit has shown me to know better. What, like what? You don't have to do that. Yeah, exactly. We don't have to, uh, yeah, do any mental gymnastics or apologizing for the text. It's more fun, and then we can be silly about it too. Like it's like, oh, this text is saying some weird stuff. Don't have to defend it or yeah. All right, Tux, let's do it.
This is titled Who Wrote Mark's Gospel?
Okay.
Mark's Gospel is similar to other classical biographies which don't identify their author's name in their accounts. Plato and Xenophon, for example, don't identify themselves as the authors of their Socratic apologies. Of course, there were a variety of other ways an author could attach their name to a text, such as in a title or on a flyleaf. So it could be that Plato, Xenophon, and even Mark added their names to their original publications in one of these other ways. All the early manuscripts of Mark's Gospel attribute the authorship to Mark.
So what do you think there? Like, I see a couple of flags there.
So
Yeah,
so he's already made it a concession that the earliest manuscript of Mark does not have a self-attribution. The other thing is, yeah, sure, it's possible that like when I was in 5th grade, I had my favorite folder and I kept all my homework in that, we'll call it a Spider-Man folder. And I lost the cover of that folder because I love that damn folder so much. But now I'm handing you all my homework and the back part of the folder, right? You have no idea what Spider-Man was doing on the front of that folder, but I just tell you, right? This is little Niddy's folder, and it had this beautiful cover, this amazing cover, and it had my final page of homework in the front cover, but it's lost to time. Yeah, that's possible, right? That the most important piece of my homework that had my actual name on it is lost to time. But what we're talking about is the God of the universe preserving his word. And this important part to validate the credibility of the witness is fallen off like a 5th grader's folder. It's gone. Oh no. But later, oh, we found it, right?
that's funny. Spider-Man Trapper Keeper.
Indeed. Or so that's one thing, and then how early does he mean
that? What do you say?
early?
Yeah, what do you mean by early? Like
Right.
when I hear early and I hear Mark, you pretty much don't have solid copies until somewhere around 250 and later. And there's definitely no, to me, there's a before Justin in the Gospels and there's after Justin Martyr in the Gospels.
Right.
And the minute that you have Justin in the Gospels and Justin is not mentioning Mark specifically, and he's going to address that he thinks Mark is being addressed by Justin, and I've had it out with him in the comments that I don't believe that's true, and that there is a indirect mentioning of Mark, but it's actually, I believe, a reference, or more likely a reference to a non-canonical Gospel of Peter.
Sure.
So I'm getting ahead of myself, but
yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah.
But we're talking before we have real good copies of Mark, we're in the late 2nd century at the earliest, and we're probably in the early 3rd century.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So to me, that's a little, maybe not deceptive, but it certainly builds it sounds like a stronger case if it's actual and factual, which I don't think it is.
Not a single copy has an anonymous title, and not a single copy attributes the book to a different author. By contrast, the letter to the Hebrews is another New Testament book where no author is named in the text.
So what do you think about that comment? Like, something something's off about that, but I don't know enough about Hebrews to say, oh, well, this letter is worthy of this critique versus a gospel that is direct quotations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, from what I know about the book of Hebrews is that its authorship is highly contested, and has been for 2 millennia. But well, that's assuming that our earliest like full copies of Hebrews are that old. Um, but some people even are willing to put forth the conjecture that a woman wrote it, and the reason that we don't have an author on it is because a woman wrote it. Right? And church fathers who were misogynistic didn't want someone like Thecla's name being circulated around the churches, but they knew they couldn't attribute the authorship to a man. They didn't have a stand-in man to staple to that text, so they just were like, throw away the part of the Trapper Keeper that has the actual authorship on it. Um, there are hints that it could be like another Pauline letter, and some scholars think that because of the comprehensiveness of the intertextuality between the Book of Hebrews and the Old Testament, and the mention of, I believe, of Timothy in the text. So someone is aware, whoever authored Hebrews is aware of Timothy having some kind of spiritual authority or influence over the intended audience. So there's that. Or, some scholars think in much more minority, it's like it might have been authored by like Apollos or shoot. Yeah, just some other early apostle. But then, and other people are like, it's cool, we don't know. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But when it comes to authorship, then, right? I think people want to include Hebrews because of that intertextual connection between the Christ figure and the Old Testament. And the more documents and resources and coherence that they can have with those Messiah ideas in a single text, the better, right? Oh, this makes sense of all these weird prophecies or these parts of the sacrificial system and these other things that God did throughout Israel's history. Now we have answers, right? Now we can say that we have a spiritual lineage from the Jews and a legitimate Messiah candidate through these prophecies, right? Like Psalm 110 and the Genesis account of Melchizedek. And this is how we can have a new priesthood, and this is how we can have atonement for our sins without the temple. So that's a lot of important claims to get Christianity off the ground. And I would think, to your point, that the authorship of a document like that is actually very important. I would find it really interesting if, we dug up in Rome a manuscript of Hebrews that we, carbon date to like 50. And on the front cover, it says, Paul the apostle and worker or slave to Jesus Christ, to the Hebrews, right? That would be fantastic. And then I would be like, wow, that I would rate that as a more comprehensive and beautiful, possibly inspired work than the Gospels themselves, because the book of Hebrews does a much better job of demonstrating the covenant idea of Christian grace than the Gospels in fact do. Yeah, Jesus dies, but he says some problematic things while he's walking the earth, like the kingdom of God is already here, right? Or like, what does he say? You have to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Or if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. The people will be separated by basically what they did, and the sheep and the goats. And So the idea of the covenant of grace that isn't very explicit in the Gospels, but is in the book of Hebrews. There you go.
Accordingly, we have early manuscripts with anonymous titles, and early fathers attribute the letter to as many as 4 different authors. But there's no parallel to this authorial anonymity or diversity for Mark's Gospel. In fact, all of the earliest fathers who comment on the Gospel's authorship attribute the writing to Mark.
Anything area you want to address? Like, it's pretty common knowledge stuff.
Yeah. That seems to be. It could be that could be like apologetics regurgitation, or it could be like I'd want to see what sources that is citing that aren't like 100+ years removed from even the most conservative dates for Mark's authorship.
I agree. So
it's kind of
furthermore,
like,
these 1st and 2nd century.
Well, hang on. I mean, it's kind of similar to like there's a YouTube channel. It's called Saints Unscripted, and it's a Mormon apologetics channel. And on that channel, this is like saying Saints Unscripted is good evidence for the authorship of the Book of Mormon when they're, however many years removed from Joseph Smith's revelations, but they're attesting that Joseph Smith did in fact see the golden plates and that Mormonism is true and Jesus did all the stuff, right? That's the kind of gap we're dealing with at minimum when we're talking about these early texts. And we don't trust Saints Unscripted to be an early attestation of Mormonism, do we?
I don't.
I don't either.
I don't. I got
but
some
essentially,
Mormon cousins
the
that
analogy
count.
is they heard from someone who heard from someone who heard from someone, and they're linking their attestation that these are authored by Joseph Smith. It gets to span across all those decades and chain of hearsay, and that's what we have in early church fathers. They heard from someone who heard from someone who heard from someone that this is who wrote this thing. And then they wrote it down. Oh, yeah, we know who wrote that. All right, go on.
Fathers hail from disparate provinces scattered around the Roman Empire. Papias from Asia Minor, Clement of Alexandria from Egypt, Tertullian from Carthage, and Irenaeus from Gallia. North, south, east.
So what is that? Like, what does that mean? When you have basically some early authors or early preachers or essentially kind of the heir apparents to the list of pre-papacies like that, does that validate that the Gospel of Mark? Like I find it something's not right there either.
Yeah,
there's something going up there. Like he's listing off. It's kind of like there's a line in one of my favorite commencement speeches from Neil Gaiman, in which he tells the first job he's trying to get. He's gone to these other publications and he's written for them. He then says, to make up for it, I made a point to write for all of these that I listed so that I wasn't actually lying. I was just chronologically challenged. And to me, there's something to this list that is building the recipe that he wants to deliver later in the video. And even though these are real people and they did have Christian things, it seems like he's building a case, building a resume that really wasn't earned at the time. But to basically chronologically unchallenge this claim. Like I've seen a lot of some of these, like they're relied upon as the chain of command.
Right.
And I think Pelagia's had a really good video explaining some of the issues with it. I'm pretty sure I've seen Derek's have several scholars on. History Valley has had several scholars on who basically have really torn apart some of the foundational beliefs that this was clearly a good chain of command, and we can trust this.
Yeah. And here's okay, let's make a few observations of the list at its face. So Papias is, let's see, and if you just do this like even with Wikipedia, okay, that I guess if it's Papias of Areopolis, I want to know what document they're saying that Papias actually attests Mark is Mark's. And in fact, most of his writing probably doesn't come to us until near the end of his life. Clement, Tertullian, and Irenaeus are all. If we try to go with the like Habermas, like the minimal facts indicate that this document can't be more than 15 years after the gospel. So, if you do that early dating of when Mark was written, now we're jumping off 70 years to our earliest attestations that is actually who wrote this thing. So,
Right.
Again, this is almost exactly like trying to trust Saints Unscripted for, the authenticity. Well, not exactly. Let's say like it's worse than us trying to substantiate the veracity of like a modern election, right? It's like saying like, oh, we 70 years from now we know Trump was still president because all these people back here 2 weeks after the election said so. President in 2022 or 2020. What you know what I mean? 2021. So the other thing is one of the things that I think Christian apologists are trying to do by putting the locations there. They're trying to say that these people so far apart are all saying the same thing. Well, the New Testament makes an assumption that this kind of travel for the purpose of preaching the Christian message was normal. It was normal to try and spread your ideology to major centers or metropolitan areas. It was normal for people to travel to these major metropolitan areas and preach and teach and say their spiel. So if this was their career, if that was Paul's career, his damn job to take this message around, it's not a surprise that the major metropolitan areas have some kind of Christians in them. They're not far apart because that's all the people did is they moved the fuck around to spread their religion. So it's only far apart if you just presuppose that no one moved around, that everyone just stayed in their seat, that they just loved Jesus, and then it finally got around to them that so and so wrote this thing, right? No, of course not. Or like, what would be the point of Paul writing to the Corinthians if he wouldn't go from somewhere like from Rome to Corinth, and then for Luke to say that Paul was in Ephesus and he's carting his own ass to Jerusalem to then go take a Nazirite vow. Like, they did all this kind of moving around on the reg. So what? Not that fantastic of a claim now, is it?
Yeah, I think I think Dr. Kip Davis had a presentation one time and pulled up a map that was pretty close to what it would have been around 1 or 200 BC, and basically talked about what destinations were approximate. It was primarily Old Testament, but most of the destinations that Jesus went to were roughly a day's walk away.
Yep.
And you didn't need to take a boat to get to them.
Right. Well, there's that, but also like what's a few weeks in the ancient world of travel if that's your job?
If that's your job.
If
Right.
you're divinely oriented
Yeah,
to do it. I mean, so what
there
then?
were spice and medicine traders clearly in the somebody was using those Roman roads.
Exactly, yeah. So this idea that they're widespread, it's our this would be like saying what's a good example? I don't know. I'm struggling a little bit. It's but you
Yeah,
get
it's
but to
midnight.
them that this was not widespread would be having attestation of mark in uh, uh, in a 100 AD Chinese text. That would be widespread attestation of authorship.
Yeah.
I'd consider that shit
That would
miraculous. I'd be like, damn.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Chief Holy Spirit in the Americas.
Sure, yeah, or like in South American, right? Like that would be incredible. Like Camille likes that one. If we like dug up under like
Yeah.
a temple before the Inquisition or before the Spaniards got there, for sure, dated it, and it was a manuscript attesting the authorship of Mark, it'd be over. It'd be like, wow, okay, that's beyond belief that should be there.
Yeah. All right, let me play this.
East and West, all are represented. The earliest and most valuable witness to the authorship of Mark's Gospel comes from John the Elder, an original disciple of Jesus. John's testimony was provided to his contemporary Papias in the latter quarter of the 1st century. Interestingly, John's testimony is not focused on identifying Mark as the author of the Gospel as if it was unknown or unclear. Rather, it's the known fact of Mark's authorship that calls for John's response in the first place.
So one of the things I'm confused here, and I'm going to rewind it just a little bit, is he cites this source right here. So if he's doing ecclesiastical history, and he's referring to something in the late 1st century about something that was written probably in the early 4th century, if I'm not mistaken.
For the ecclesiastical history, yeah, that's a much later document, yeah.
Like I don't. That's a pretty big bridge to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, ecclesiastical history is basically the giant diaper to try and keep all this shit together.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
To get the story straight for everyone else.
To get two landmasses kind of covered, but I guess the metaphor stands. That's funny. The diaper to make all this shit stick together. Catch all the poop. Yeah. The birth of a religion. Congratulations.
First couple hundred years, it's always messy when you're getting off your feet with your cult, you know.
There's so much that bothers me here. You could write a novel, and I don't know enough about it exactly. I just know it smells funny.
Yeah.
Like I think this gent here at iPub definitely is looking the other way on a lot of information to say that line. What isn't he telling you?
Right.
When he makes a reference to John the Elder, between 75 and 100, but cites a source from essentially 325 to 345, if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves correct.
Who wrote that damn thing?
Eusebius.
Eusebius, that's right. Ecclesiastical history. When was this dated? Yeah, 4th century. Yeah, it's
So
definitely like it's almost like a form of like Christian Doctor Who, where you get in like the testimony TARDIS and you can jump a couple hundred years and it's still just as good.
so that to me is smells funny as well.
Yeah.
There's lots of stuff that there's you can't really prove it wrong or right, but you've got um, you've got a narrative that sounds like you're building an awfully strong resume for something there is pretty much zero resume for. I don't know. Is resume a good analogy? You
Um.
think?
Well, like let's steal the favorite apologist lines that we're just trying to build a case here, okay? We're taking in the
Yeah,
facts and the data and we're giving it back to
it's
you
an
so that
accumulative case.
yeah, you get the best case for your belief in Christianity is true.
Yeah. Well, I think this cumulative case, it's a good sales pitch, but I'm not buying it.
Sure.
Mark as the author of the gospel as if it was unknown or unclear. Rather, it's the known fact of Mark's authorship that calls for John's response in the first place. You see,
So wait,
John
he's
was an
saying
original
that
hearer of Jesus.
yeah, so he's saying that John wrote a gospel because he knew about Mark. Well, then that's not an independent gospel then, right? Like the whole
Like,
apologetics industry has their parroted line. This is all four independent attestations of the life and sayings and doings of Jesus. It's amazing. And the fact that they're different and unique and special means that, it's got more witnesses and they're independent, right? But
well,
if he's saying that John wrote
what
his gospel
gospel?
because he knows Mark, then that just poof.
Well, what gospel did John the Elder write?
Right,
He
yeah,
didn't write a
right.
gospel. And I'm
Oh,
pretty
okay.
sure this Janet iPub believes that John, son of Zebedee, wrote the Gospel of John.
Right.
So there's a disconnect there or a clarification needed what he means here on who the gospel he's referring to or the writing he's referring to that doesn't reference. He's admitting that it doesn't reference the Gospel of Mark, but it's requiring a response as if Gospel of Mark is well known by him.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
So I don't know. Um, and if I remember correctly, CBS also makes a reference that John the Elder did write the Gospel of John, which I believe this gent refutes.
Oh boy.
But I could be. But I'm so confused. I'm so confused on
Uh,
because I even brought that up to him, and he just responded with no. So
no, I'm not
I
going to
don't
look
know.
into this because yeah. Ay, ay, ay.
There
All
it
right,
is.
let's do more.
Jesus and Mark wasn't. So why would John promote or defend the use of Mark's gospel? John's answer is that since Mark was Peter's translator, he had both heard and repeated Peter's accounts about Jesus' sayings and deeds. So John didn't view Mark's gospel as anything other than an accurate record of Peter's stories. And who better to make such a judgment than an original hearer of Jesus and a companion of Peter's? For this reason, it's noteworthy that Justin Martyr, in the middle of the 2nd century, describes Mark's gospel as Peter's memoir. Whether one accepts John's testimony as true or not, the record shows that Mark's authorship was already assumed in the latter quarter of the 1st century by an original disciple of Jesus who obviously was esteemed enough to offer a highly sought-after commendation of his younger contemporary's record of Jesus' ministry.
All right. So that's a lot to take in,
Yeah.
but it goes back in my opinion, it kind of goes back to where he was building the resume. He built it a little bit more. He built a little bit more, and he's built a resume that seems like it's a good, strong foundation, but I don't think any of it has a good foundation at all.
Right.
There's a, and he's chronologically challenged once again on referring to something that's both conflicting with whether John, son of Zebedee, John the Elder, wrote a gospel, and it's kind of a bridge too far for the information from the 4th century to be seeping back into the 1st century. Seems like that shit flows downhill.
Right. And there's like, I mean, the only other reasons to think that Mark is an eyewitness is that whole naked dude detail that like happens like towards the end of Mark's gospel when like shit's going down, and then the boy loses his robe.
51, 52, I think.
Yeah. Like that.
So,
that's the only reason that
yeah.
like, oh, why include the naked dude? Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, and quoting Justin Martyr does not refer to any particular gospel and say that's the Gospel of Mark. He just refers to him as the memoirs. So I think he's just kind of putting that round peg in a square hole.
oh, okay. Yeah, right.
With kind of referring to, it's weird how he built
after commendation of his younger contemporary's record of Jesus' ministry. Now, it's not clear to me why a modern scholar might think they would know better than John the Elder about Mark's authorship or his accuracy. After all, Mark...
See, here's the thing. I do not see once in any of his sources John the Elder state, oh, I witnessed my buddy here, Mark, he wrote something, and man, do I approve this message. I don't find that anywhere. I don't find that in anybody's list that he's mentioned in this video so far. I definitely don't see anything from John the Elder, and I definitely don't see anything from Justin Martyr. So where do I go from there? If I'm told that's where it is, shouldn't I see it?
Right. Yeah, and for reference to why we're skeptical on all this, go back to Pelagia's chain of custody video. It really does. I don't want to rehash the whole damn thing here, but yeah, it really does hit the nail on the head of why this case is problematic.
This case is problematic. Yes. Yeah, the chain of custody is broken in so many places. It's not a chain.
No.
It might be, an attempted handoff, and the baton got dropped once or twice, and then the chain connected again, and then somebody claimed there was a good connection, but until the Romans are 100% behind Christianity, then you don't see a chain, proper chain.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up in Jerusalem shortly after the ministry of Jesus, and his family knew the apostles. He had traveled with Paul and his relative Barnabas in Asia Minor, and eventually was attached to Peter as his translator in Rome, presumably. Since Mark...
Presumably. So he does have an out there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you understood?
Yeah, and the funny thing is,
Rome, presumably,
if you grant that the same Mark who helped author the gospel is in fact the same Mark from the book of Acts, then you're essentially saying, I'm resting part of my eternal hope and salvation on a guy who thought it necessary to basically give up on missionary work for a little while. A guy who was in serious church conflict for who knows how long. until he reappears in First Peter 5. So like the assumption is also made that there aren't other John Marks or Mark um, persons running around in these narratives.
Look at that. Jenna just popped in.
Yeah. Hey, Jenna.
All right. Let's see. How did Jenna on the screen? All right. Let's play him. We're almost done. We're about 2/3 of the way through.
Who knew we could do almost an hour on 10 minutes of content?
Oh, I know.
Since Mark was from a Judean priestly class, he was most likely literate. Though Greek was probably not his first language, a majority of Jerusalemites appear to have been trilingual, knowing Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek. Josephus says even slaves in Judea could easily learn Greek if they wanted to. A literate Judean...
So one thing that bothers me there is in statistics, you have, and somebody just used, and it might have been you. Was it you? That used the analogy, maybe it was Vice Rhino, I don't remember. But somebody used the analogy that when you make a statement and then you make a follow-up statement that makes the first statement sound more likely, that it's a psychological, a little bit of a psychological unlocking when that happens. But in statistic, it actually makes the statement less true as soon as you add that extra detail. So one of the ones that I heard a couple of years ago was a very intelligent mathematician is who also plays poker is probably a school teacher or something like that. And when you basically line the statement 1, statement 2, statement 3, it actually becomes less likely after the second. It actually becomes less in statistics because the number of smart people who are mathematicians could be a group, that's pretty big. And then as soon as you say poker player, you could reduce that number of mathematicians that are very smart and that are school teachers down to less than 20%. When you just said mathematicians that are teachers, very smart mathematicians that are teachers, it brings nearly 50% of all mathematicians could be in that category. As soon as you add that middle detail, it actually reduces it to less than 20% being accurate. I think what he's done here is that type of statistic. He's basically taken the statistic, this is likely, therefore this is likely, which should increase, but it actually decreases.
Right.
I hope I explained that correct.
No, and just because you're trilingual does not mean that you're what's the word? Scribal. Right? That
Oh, yeah.
Just because you know how to use the phonetics, the spoken words of language does not mean you know how to write those languages comprehensively. And to say that people in the ancient world could do that is almost to say that they could do 6 languages. Right? Like because, especially like for the difference, like Hebrew and Greek were both symbol-oriented language systems. Literate. There you go. It doesn't make you, just knowing the phonetics of language does not also make you literate, let alone literate to the level of writing a comprehensive narrative with like structure or argument types, logical interplay with the characters. Something else is going on here for a person that has the ability to communicate in multiple languages, in addition to following literary tropes or um, uh, respecting a chronology, using proper verb conjugations for their time period. That requires a whole different set of skills than just knowing the right words to say to the right people to get by in your social life. That's it.
A Christian like Mark, writing in Greek as a second language, certainly helps to explain why Mark's Greek is competent but hardly impressive compared to classical biographies, especially since this gospel appears to be Mark's only major composition, and John the Elder insinuates that it showed in its lack of order. It nearly goes without saying that
so
the
let's
Elder
get this straight, guys. The God of the universe has made sure to only author this eyewitness testimony in a less than accurate way. It's not perfectly chronological because the God of the universe doesn't think that a perfectly chronological document's important. And it's not syntactically beautiful because we had to use the guy who was just competent, not the guy who was fluent. Okay, sure. Didn't know that was a limit that we had on the most important message in all of human history, but here we are. All right, go on.
Here we are.
John would have had less work to do if Mark's gospel had simply been attributed to Peter. But it seems in this respect the Christians were transparent about its true authorship, even though it required an additional layer of explanation in defense of its accuracy. All this evidence suggests there's no good reason to seriously doubt the significant positive evidence for Mark's authorship of the Gospel. Our earliest certification of Mark's writing comes from a contemporary of Mark who was both older and more esteemed as an original disciple. The later fathers unanimously confirm this earlier witness, even though it's clear they weren't all relying upon this one source. By contrast, the classical work known as the Anabasis of Alexander has much weaker external evidence in its favor, and yet no scholar I'm aware of is skeptical of Arian's authorship. If some biblical scholars remain skeptical of Mark's authorship, they can't blame this classicist, at least, for not being persuaded of their skepticism.
So over on Digital Gnosis's channel, earlier this week, James and Nathan and Nathan and Camille, and then later James, did a response to Trent Horn about authorship and things like that. You guys should check it out because they rip all this apart. And Camille actually uses early Christian sources of biography that do cite their sources and do report who is actually writing it. So some early Christians did think it was very important to say, it's me, I'm the one who wrote this. And here's what happened to me, right? So the idea that ancient authors writing something biographical did not include think it important to include their names is incorrect. And in fact, even in the epistles, there are little tidbits of name inclusions, right? Like Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ. What's another one? See how large the letters I'm writing with my own hand, which in Galatians is a concession that Paul, or whoever really wrote it, was using an amanuensis, someone who wrote on his behalf in that particular instance, which also then muddies the water as to like who's really writing this thing, especially in other cases. So yeah, fun. Or in Corinthians, First Corinthians, it says this is coming from Paul, Silas, and Timothy. It's a consortium of people. It's a damn what's it, collusion bucket that's making this text for you guys. So there you go. We had a committee meeting about what we need to say to the Corinthians.
Yeah. I missed that meeting, and damn it,
Me too.
when I missed that meeting, they voted me in as the program chairman, and now I'm stuck with the position.
Well, they also told us that like we shouldn't really want to get married, Tux. Like that was part of the committee
true.
meeting. That it's better to be single, and if you struggle in the pants with that, if your pants are on fire because you can't keep it in your pants, then I guess you can get married. But it's still better to not. You hear that, Christians? You got to get off this I got to get married boat, okay? Paul didn't think it was a good idea, and Jesus said, you should just cut your dick off for the kingdom of God, because then you'll get it right. If that's too hard of a teaching for you, then you can go disagree with Jesus.
Jesus. So what you're
I
saying
had to bring
is,
up dicks tonight. I don't know.
I guess mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
All right. Well, that is the discussion.
Yeah.
That is the discussion about our friend here. I think he does a pretty good job, by the way, and there's some videos I'm pretty strongly against of his.
I wonder if Hats Off has responded to this guy.
I've watched all of Hats Off videos. I would have jumped for joy. This YouTuber does not have very many subscription.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. How many
we're
subs
picking
he's
on
got.
a little guy.
315.
Oh, I feel
315 subs. I mean, we're little guys. I mean, I got,
okay. Yeah.
I got less than. I'm well under 50 right now.
Oh yeah,
last I
subscribe to
looked, I was
Tux
like
TV.
32.
We're multi-streaming, guys. We're a little
And
stream.
you're
community.
somewhere around. You're somewhere around the same, aren't you? Somewhere around 315 also.
No, I'm 257.
You're 250. So there you go. Hey,
We're working.
This is no punching at all. There's no punching up or down. It's just no punching.
Yeah.
You know.
But this was good.
That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah.
And
All right.
Last I looked, I was around 30. I haven't looked in a couple of days. So, all right. I think my work is done here.
This was great,
Unless
Tux.
there's something else you want to add.
Helping me along on this one.
My
No,
pleasure.
just I think tomorrow night, while my wife's at home Bible study, I'll do the rest of, or I'll try to get through the rest of First Clement, and then probably Thursday, I'll see what I'm going. So I guess this is like a big personal / channel update. There's a guy who runs a podcast called Spirit Watch Ministries on Spotify, and he's been covering my former church's cultiness and shittiness. And I'm supposed to talk to him Thursday. And I was going to report back to you guys how that goes, or if we're going to record it. And if we record it, I'll make sure that it gets played on this channel. So, yeah, good stuff. Because people said they want to hear a little bit more culty stuff too. So there you go. That's the update, folks.
Sounds good.
And thanks for making my birthday super special at poker. It was fun.
Oh, yay. How did you do?
I did good. I won some. I won some.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I won some. How did you like the tournament? The new tournament style that we did tonight. Yeah,
Better because I
that's
feel less
that's
guilty
close.
now.
Yeah. How did you just have one buy-in,
Two, but
or you
still,
had
I
two?
mean,
Okay.
I think my wife
Uh,
would much prefer $5 night.
yeah. Like I I would like to see them have the cutoff,
Five
have a
buy-ins.
cutoff, and yeah, it
Five,
seems
five,
like
five, five.
yeah,
Just five.
it seems like there needs to be a cutoff at some point because it'll get a little confusing. And then you heard his response of administratively this sucks
Right.
because he just
Yeah.
basically quadrupled the number of
Potential.
transactions he's got to keep track of. Yeah.
Right.
So, who knows? Yeah, I enjoyed the tournament. I, of course, didn't get in the money, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I did well on the cash game. You know,
That's where
I
we clean up
usually I
all our
usually ebb
mistakes
and
for
flow.
the tournament.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Time to
let's
hit
end it
the hard.
here. Is there any let's see, anything anybody we want to acknowledge out there and say hi to?
I was
Thanks
just.
James, and I saw YouTube Punk in here. I
Mhm.
see Maya, and I see Finhammer. I'm not familiar with Finhammer.
I think he's been on Jay's streams before in the chat. And
Oh
then
yeah,
Michael Apple is a
Michael
regular here.
Apple
Maya,
and Sobek. I recognize
yes, and
him
Sobek.
or
Yep.
her. Uh, let's see who else.
And Yahoo.
Casey,
Thanks for coming earlier,
hey,
Yahoo, if you're still listening.
Fenton,
Oh yeah,
definitely,
Fenton.
and Jenna.
Yes.
And thanks one and all. It's fun to get started.
Mm-hmm. We'll be doing more
And
of
thanks for
this.
coming out, checking us out. We'll do
Yep.
some more. And bow tie blessings to all. Go ahead, Niddy. Give your because
Oh,
give your little.
and that's Nitty.